Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change Podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserloh.
Welcome back into the Four Tire Change Podcast. Dawson Iserloh with you here via ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Episode number 11. The NASCAR season rolls on, and another exciting race to talk about. It had things that were exciting about it. The overall race maybe lacked in complete interest, but all in all, wasn't the worst, considering Richmond has just struggled to put out really good racing in the last few years. So that's what we'll start. We will have a guest on today. Matt Miguez of the Miguez Mindset Podcast will be joining me a little bit later on to kind of do a little bit of an update, a recap, so to speak, of where we are in the season, some of the expectations, things that he's been excited to see throughout the season. But for now, let's talk about that race at Richmond. The storyline going into the day, at least, was the weather and how rainy it was. But, of course, NASCAR put in a short track wet weather package. Not exactly the same thing as the road course where you put the windshield wipers on and you race in the rain, but it does give them the ability to start a race, of course, if conditions are damp and if you get some rain and some moisture like you did on Sunday. This, was, of course, was Easter Sunday. So they put the wet weather package out there, the treaded tires, everything like that, and they get the race going, and it had unbelievable results. Everybody was like, wow, NASCAR, what a job you just did. You put the wet weather tires on, everybody's all over the track. You got 5 different grooves. It was incredible racing early on. Unfortunately, that didn't last too long. They called a competition caution at lap 30 to check on everybody. Then they said they couldn't have competitive pit stops because pit road was still too wet. That was kind of a mess. You ran all these caution laps, and eventually, once you went to the slick tires, that incredible back and forth racing that we saw in the early portion of the race just kind of went away. And that was tough because you had what looked like a really promising start to this whole thing, and all of a sudden now you're back to Richmond, right, where guys are really struggling to pass, and the cars who have track position are dominating, and I don't know if that's the best. Now, look, there were some aspects of this race that I liked. Tire wear was a factor. I think that's a good thing at short tracks, and you saw way faster speeds, way faster lap times when guys were on new tires than when they were on old, even if it was a back marker car. So all that's great, but all in all, just not a ton of exciting racing throughout the middle portion of this thing. And there were some different strategies that played out, which is one of the real appeals of Richmond. You can have cars who do the one-stop. You can have cars who want to do a two-stop strategy. But then you had a caution for Kyle Busch into the wall that kind of messed some of that up. As, it was a questionable caution, just to say the least. He gets in the wall, but he gets it straightened out, and he keeps going. They call the caution pretty quick. And all of a sudden, all that strategy goes out the window because now we have a caution flag here, and the guys who were trying to do the one-stop, none of it matters anymore. So that I thought was unfortunate because it really wrecked with the flow, at least in the middle portion of this race, where you were going to see some different things play out. And again, at a race like Richmond, where you don't necessarily have the most action all over the track, things like that can give you it. So I didn't think that was necessarily a good decision from NASCAR, but all in all, they make mistakes. Then there was the Christopher Bell strategy move later on in the race that I thought was really intriguing. The real contenders here, Larson, Truex, and Hamlin were all strong. Larson kind of faded a little bit, but he ends up coming back up, having an eventful end of this race, which we'll get into. But you had the Bell strategy move, which might have worked, but he gets a pit road speeding penalty leaving pit road. And so now that's out the window. He's back. He still ends up, getting up there in the top 10 to run again, but he doesn't have a chance to win the race like that. And it essentially becomes, who's going to try and track down the leaders? Martin Truex Jr. is going to cruise to the victory. That's the bottom line. And then Bubba Wallace gets into Kyle Larson with 2 to go. Look, it was interesting. It looked really bad when it happened. Like, what is Bubba doing? Those two are good friends, and they had a little funny moment after the race. The funny thing is Larson ends up not damaging his car too much and then having a great pit stop and finishing in the top 5. Bubba Wallace kind of wrecked his day because he then had a bad stop, had trouble on pit road, and everything went. So maybe karma worked out in the way that karma's supposed to in that situation after Bubba had made the mistake and gotten into Larson. All in all, that creates a caution with 2 to go, and it means Martin Truex Jr. is not going to cruise to the win anymore. Denny Hamlin's pit crew, they're the player of the game, so to speak, of the day. They get a tremendous stop. They give him the track position he needs, and now he's the control car. And then let's get to the restart. Truex loses his mind, by the way, saying that Denny jumped it. Then he felt like Denny used him up. He starts bouncing into cars, turning left into Larson on the back stretch. It was very unlike him. Then he goes up and bumps Hamlin after the checkered flag a few times. Denny wins the race, of course, out of the green-white checker. But, man, it sure looked like he jumped the start. When you look at the replay, it looks even worse. here's the tough thing. I understand why NASCAR didn't make the decision to penalize Hamlin. You're going to have a 500-mile race or 500-lap race, whatever it is, right? It's 300 laps, I guess. And you're going to try and penalize the winner on the last lap where there's no kind of, restarting this. Oh, we'll penalize Hamlin. He'll go to the tail end of the lead lap and we'll redo this whole restart. No, you're going to take the win away and give it to the second-place car. And it's tough to do that. And they don't want to set the precedent of just being an official. They don't want to be making the pass interference call that an NFL ref has to make all the time, right? Or the NBA player who drives to the basket with a few seconds left and the official has to decide whether it's a foul or not in real time. They don't want to do that, so I get that. But at the other end of this thing, like if you're going to have a rule and you're not going to enforce it by the letter of the law, then why do you have the rule? Like I struggle with that a little bit. So I went back and forth on this. I don't know. I like that they didn't, influence the outcome of this thing. But all in all, I mean, he jumped the start. He started rolling before he got to the restart zone. So that's tough. Either way, though, Denny Hamlin gets the win, his second of the year. Truex kind of has that heartbreak. And look, it's just been a tough run of luck for Truex the last couple seasons, it feels like. And again, he flirted with retirement, but he's back, and he really deserved the win, but he's not going to get it. And that's how these things go sometimes. So that will be interesting. All things considered, Richmond was, I don't know what to make of it. The short track package didn't seem like it changed a whole lot, and that's going to be something we continue to evaluate. We'll get another chance to at Martinsville, which I'll wait until we bring Matt Miguez on to talk a little bit about that race coming up this weekend. But all in all, Richmond had its moments, but still just doesn't seem to deliver the most exciting racing time in and time out. All right, we now get to welcome on a guest of the show. He's a host of the Miguez Mindset Podcast. Matt Miguez now joins us. Matt, just wanted to have you on, get some different perspectives here because it's that point of the season where I think we're starting to see things. We're starting to see who's going to be the real contenders this year. We have a good idea in the standings. I got a couple surprises, but not any massive ones. So first, I just gave my thoughts about the Richmond restart. Yeah. At the end there. I think it's clear Hamlin jumped it. But I don't necessarily hate NASCAR's decision not to penalize him. I think it's tough. What were your thoughts on the ruling and the lack of penalty there when it looked like he really jumped it?
He obviously jumped it. There's no doubt about it. But I kind of agree with you. I don't hate NASCAR's decision at all because my thing is this: had it created a obvious advantage for him, like if he'd have just blown away from the rest of the pack, then that's one thing. But by turn one, Truex was right there with him. Now, granted, Hamlin was able to push him up the racetrack and keep him. So, I guess you could say that that's somewhat of an advantage. But I didn't feel like him jumping the restart put him levels above everybody else.
Yeah, and like I said just now, which I think is the key for me, NASCAR doesn't want to become the official in an NBA game who has to call foul or no foul late. You know what I mean? Right. They don't want to be making calls like that. Again, for so long, they've said the game officiates itself, right? The races, the NASCAR drive, that's why they don't have too many penalties for fights and things like that. So all in all, I think we're mostly in agreement there. All right, let's look at Martinsville, and then we'll do a little bit of a standings thing here. It's interesting. I just talked about the short track package. It didn't seem like it changed a whole lot. Martinsville, for so long, was so exciting because, look, you can move a guy out of the way if you want to move a guy out of the way, right? That's that old school NASCAR short track thing. But it's tougher to pass now, and I don't know. The new car gives you a lot of really good racing at some places, but Martinsville hasn't been one. Going into this weekend, what are your kind of thoughts about the racing we're going to see, and who do you like in a race like this?
One thing I've noticed with the short track package is that it kind of levels the playing field because, before the next-gen car, you had 4 or 5 guys that, they dominated the short tracks, right? You knew that one of those guys was going to win, and now that's not so much the case. Now, you have your Denny Hamlins that still, they're just good short track racers and they find a way to get it done regardless. But I think the playing field is a lot more leveled. It's going to be interesting. Martinsville is always fun. The tighter configuration of the track is interesting. The Hendricks boys are going to be running the 40th anniversary paint schemes, which I think is really cool. It'll be a fun weekend. I'm interested to see, I'm biased of me, but I'm interested to see Chase Elliott. He's built some momentum over the last couple of weeks, finally cracked the top 5 on Sunday night. Can he build off of that and maybe finally snap this winless streak that he's on?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing too, right? He's done a nice job points-wise, and look, last year was difficult with the injury, and we don't anticipate him missing 5 or 6 races. So I think he's going to be fine if he continues to have point his way in the way he is right now. But at some point, he's got to win a race,
Correct.
And I think he knows that. So I will be fascinated to see what he does. Look, the other thing that I've noticed the last few weeks, Hendrick and Gibbs are dominating right now.
Yes.
Which, look, you mentioned the parity with the next gen car, and that's been the case. This year, we're starting to kind of go back to where we were a little bit, and it's early, so I don't want to make any big judgments there. But we've seen a lot of Denny Hamlin and a lot of Kyle Larson and William Byron.
Yep.
I will be interested to see, can somebody jump up that's not from one of those teams? Can Stewart-Haas, who has had some success at the short tracks and has been a little better this year than they were last year, can one of those guys challenge? I'll go ahead and give my race winner first, and then I'll let you go right after that. I will pick against the grain a little bit, and I'll go with somebody, in my opinion, who is trying to make kind of a splash here and is maybe going to be a surprise to some. But give me Eric Jones in the 43 car. This is probably the biggest outlier I've picked in a race winner this season so far. I've been really impressed with what that team has done, especially with John Hunter Nemechek in the 42 car, hanging around in the playoffs, really right there, a couple spots below it. And, look, I don't know. Maybe they bring a little extra speed to the racetrack. I'll go with a surprise pick in Eric Jones. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Martin Truex Jr. I mean, looked so good at Richmond.
Had it stolen from him, really.
We talked about the restart just now. I think he's going to be pissed off, and I think he's going to come back with that same speed and that same intensity that he had at Richmond, and I think he'll be able to pull it out this time.
So there you go. Eric Jones, Martin Truex Jr., our 2 picks. Now let's talk a little bit big picture with the standings here at this point in the year. Again, this is, I think, a time where it really starts to get fascinating looking at it. And, look, MTJ, for all we're just saying about his inability to get some wins, he's sitting first in the point standings, right there with Kyle Larson, so the consistency is there. And then, as we mentioned, the whole Hendrick and Gibbs theme, you have Denny in third and Ty in fourth. Ty Gibbs, of course. So 4 Hendrick/Gibbs cars in those spots. But Ryan Blaney's in the 5th spot. He's the defending series champion. It's not like he's sneaking up on anybody as an underdog. But with the inconsistency of Penske, look, Joey Logano had a disastrous start to the year. He's kind of reeled it back in. I've been impressed with Blaney being able to hang around with the consistent finishes in 5th. When you look at this top 10, is there a guy up there that kind of surprises you with how well they've run early on in the year?
I'm really surprised by Ty Gibbs. I mean, he showed potential as a rookie last year, but man, he's really taken a big step forward here in his second year in the Cup Series. Christopher Bell running really well once again. That's not really a surprise. And then Hendrick continues to be consistently towards the top. I mean, 3 guys in the top 10. Chase Elliott, we talked about how he's pointing his way through the standings and just searching for that first win. And I'm interested to see how Ross Chastain races over the next couple of weeks, because he's in that spot where he's good, everybody knows who he is, but he hasn't jumped into that special category quite yet, especially here in 2024. So I'm interested to see how he handles that over the next month or so.
And that Gibbs-Hendrick thing, 8 of the top 11 in the standings come from those 2 organizations. So all 8 of their drivers are in the top 11. The only one not in the top 10 is Alex Bowman. And Alex Bowman, without a couple of kind of fluky results, would be right there himself. The last one I got for you here, Matt, before we sign off, how about the guys who are outside of the playoff mix? Now, I know Logano is clearly the favorite of anyone who's not in the top 16 right now to get there because he's a past champion. So I want to look away from Joey Logano for a minute. Who's a guy that's not currently in the top 16? Of course, Suarez and Keselowski have those last 2 spots right now. So who below them, with the exception of Logano, do you think can make a charge at being a playoff driver if points are going to get you in this year?
I love Josh Berry.
Okay. It's an interesting pick.
He's been so... He got that experience last year filling in for Chase for the 6-7 races that Chase was out. And I think that paid major dividends for him. And now he's got his own ride with Stewart-Haas and has really looked good. He led several laps in Richmond on Sunday night. And that wasn't the only track this year that he's kind of hung around the top 10 and had a really good day. So I'm interested to see how he does, as we get close to the halfway point of the season here. And just kind of, can he keep that consistency, maybe pile a win or 2 together and show that in his rookie season that he can belong in NASCAR.
And that's what I was going to mention as well. He's running for Rookie of the Year right now. He's got a great shot to get there, and we'll see if he can keep it going. Well, there he is, Matt Miguez. You can hear him on the Miguez Mindset Podcast, of course, through ESPN Southwest Louisiana. I am Dawson Iserloh signing off for this week. Martinsville this weekend should be a fun one. Might be shifting around the schedule of the podcast a little bit in the next week or so stay tuned for that. But until then, we'll keep rolling along with Four Tire Change. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and subscribe.